Hello everybody, my name is Cosmic and welcome to the video in which I rank the difficulty of Dark Souls 3's bosses, including the ones from Ashes of Ariandel and the Ring City DLCs. Please keep in mind throughout this video that these rankings are entirely my opinion and in absolutely no way objective. Please let me know if you disagree or agree with my rankings and tell me why you struggle more with certain ones or find certain ones easier. With all that out of the way, let's begin by going straight on to number 25. In what is arguably the worst fight in the entire game, you come up to Archdragon Peak after using Path of the Dragon down before the Profane Capital. Similarly to Yhorm, who you've likely encountered in the game thus far, your first instinct wouldn't be to simply hit it with your weapons, as his legs are easily accessible, and hell, so is his head if you're on the right platform. You don't deal very much damage at all, and this is the game's way of telling you that you're doing it wrong, but it doesn't exactly scream at you obvious. The real way to deal with this quote-unquote boss fight is to explore the arena to find a way onto the high ground. You have to pass loads of normal dragon enemies, something I hate fighting while in the middle of a boss battle, and you have to pass this axe and chain dragon that is the most irritating and persistent enemy that can two-shot you. And he follows you all the way to the ladder that you actually have to climb to reach the platform that you jump from to do a plunging attack onto the Wyvern. You are guaranteed to one-shot this Wyvern by doing this, even with your fists, like you don't even need your sword out. I don't understand why FromSoft did this. Is it to make you feel like a badass one-shotting a boss? Is it because fighting the Wyvern on its legs is garbage? I don't know. Just try not to actually miss the jump because you'll have to do this whole thing again and nobody wants to do that. If you've ever wondered what it's like to be absolutely surrounded in a gank fight where the gankers literally stand around and do nothing 90% of the time, you got yourself a Deacons of the Deep fight. The gimmick to this fight is that one of the Deacons glows red and their health bar will be dissipated in chunks after one of these Deacons are killed. And it can go on any of the three primary types of Deacons, the small ones, the fat ones, and the tall ones. Once 5 of these are dead, 5 other Deacons will spawn, 4 of them are fat and blue, the other is small and wears a crown. Once these have spawned, the red glow will stay on him forever. Now you just gotta go kill the blue fatties quickly before they heal the boss and you're good to go. This fight doesn't really get much harder in New Game Plus cycles either. It's just like hitting training dummies that shoot fireballs at you every 15 seconds. Occasionally they'll release an AoE attack, but it doesn't even deal any damage, so it's just annoying. This is bad because the blue ones will constantly try to heal him, and if you're not in a position to punish this, the fight can actually turn into something dangerous. So just keep aggressive and kill the blue ones before things potentially get out of hand. This is a boss I wish I could love. His appearance is amazing. Having him fade into vision only after you've picked up an item in front of him or hitting him is really cool on a first playthrough. His music is creepy, and when it reaches phase 2 it kicks up to a whole new dramatic level. And all of this in a unique arena I love personally. But mechanically, the fight just does not live up to all of this. First of all, I want to talk about the damn smoke around him. This smoke is so hard to see and will kill you so quickly, and it gets closer to you as Wolnir does and often obstructs you from hitting his bracelets, which is nothing but annoying. You're forced to just stand there sometimes and wait for him to move his arm forward, and this is not how you make a boss battle. He also has an attack where he spews the smoke all around him, and this attack is undoubtedly your death unless you see it coming and run away instantly, because the AoE it has is borderline unfair. Other than that, this fight is a game of dodging some very slow arm swings or slam down attacks and punishing his arms, and this is very easy if the smoke isn't obstructing you. He summons a sword every now and then that adds almost nothing to the fight except an unnecessarily long animation of him pulling out the sword, and just before you thought the fight couldn't get any worse, he can throw a dark orb into the ground and summon skeletons to fight with him, turning this fight into a gank with bone wheels. Yeah, I really wish I could love Wolnir, but sadly his boss design is so poor I can't do it. Sorry, buddy. Here's another boss that's pretty much hated by every player in the community. The fight starts off with the tree not even active. Instead, you're forced to fight ads in an arena that's been cut off by a fog wall. Once the Greatwood activates, it's time to pop those balls. For this initial encounter, it has 3 stacks, one right in its crotch, one in its left leg, and one of its left arm. There's also another one way above its head, but unless you're on a bow-only run, I wouldn't recommend trying to get this one. Similarly to Wolnir, his health bar gets chunked every time one of them pops, and he also staggers each time one of them is popped as well. If you have enough DPS, you can pop the 2 on its left side before going for the one on its crotch without being able to do anything in terms of retaliation. The ads will be the only thing stopping you from doing something because they're super persistent. Thankfully, the Greatwood also kills these for you, so although they're infinitely spawning, you do get some breathing room. Greatwood stomps down at the ground and swings its arms in a huge AoE around it in an attempt to deal some damage. It also has two attacks that annoy the hell out of me. One where it slams its ass onto the ground and splooges ooze all over the place, and one where it mindlessly shakes around, dropping ooze sacks on top of you. I'm never a fan of attacks that forces you to keep your distance on a boss, and both of these attacks are in that category. The splooge slowly whittles down your health and doesn't let you move at full speed. Once phase 2 starts, it drops into the arena below and grows a disgusting lanky arm out of its balls, and now suddenly has many more of these balls available for you to burst. Its moveset doesn't change all that much, but it does get access to a grab attack and a few follow-ups on a lot of its standard combos with that freshly grown arm of his. The fight with the Greatwood is just tedious and not very fun, with attacks that almost force you to keep your distance and only being able to deal damage to it via bursting its balls, which sometimes are totally unreachable. It makes for a bad experience in my opinion. Say hello to the first boss I ever killed in the Soulsborne series. Iudex Gundyr is the tutorial boss fight in Dark Souls 3, and just behind Father Gascoigne and Bloodborne is the best tutorial boss in the series in my opinion. Pulling the sword out of a statue to begin your first fight of the game is really captivating, and as soon as the fight begins, Iudex welcomes you to Dark Souls. All of his attacks are fairly standard as expected from a tutorial boss. He bends his body around in all sorts of ways to swing his halberd in huge AoEs around him, stabs it forward with deceiving reach, following up with shoulder barges and kicks. Sometimes he will lunge his halberd into the ground, and when he pulls it back up, will spew debris everywhere that will stun you. Once he's almost dead, he will transform into a monster, with his left arm growing into a giant black amalgamation. This phase is intimidating for any new player, and as Iudex changes moveset so much it turns into an entirely new fight. The range and AoE of his attacks become much larger, and the timings are mixed up even more. The transformation caught me off guard so much on my first playthrough, and even further taught me what this game is all about. All in all, Iudex Gundyr is a fantastic tutorial boss that marks the first battle for anyone starting a playthrough of Dark Souls 3, and he will always be remembered in my heart as the first boss I ever killed in the franchise. The Watchdog of the Boreal Valley is also one of the most memorable bosses in the game for me. Vordt introduces a technique useful with a lot of this series' bigger bosses. Stick to the crotch, and this works flawlessly with Vordt. The only thing you can do when you're underneath him is jump backwards, and this doesn't deal damage, so all you gotta do is get straight back underneath him. His attacks are fairly basic too. He wields a frost mace, and he just swings that around a bunch and slams it in front of him, which, as I mentioned, are laughably easy to dodge just by walking underneath him. When phase 2 kicks off though, he starts charging around the arena like a headless chicken, inflicting crippling frostbite and hefty damage if he hits you. He does this 3 times in quick succession before stopping to spew frost everywhere. This gives ample time to beat the hell out of him before he initiates the true phase 2. If your weapons are good enough, you can kill him before this phase even truly starts, but this phase is just the first, with some more generous hitboxes on his attacks with more frostbite damage added on. Staying underneath him isn't effective anymore, but sticking to his ass works like a charm. I think Vordt is a good boss that once again teaches people the fundamentals of Dark Souls, but is really cheesy and can sometimes be annoying on repeat playthroughs. One of the strangest bosses in the game, the Crystal Sage is the boss stopping you from reaching the Cleansing Chapel and reaching the Deacons of the Deep. Most of the Sage's attacks involve shooting magic at you in various ways, whether it be Soul Mass, Soul Spear, Soul Rain, Crystal Soul Mass, or Dragon Breath. She also attacks you with a rapier if she decides to whip it out if you're too close to her. Funnily enough, these attacks can be parried fairly easily, so if you do massive damage on riposts, this can be an easy way to deal some big damage very quickly. At every 25% of HP you dissipate, she'll teleport away to a different area of the arena, which means you can't just keep her in one spot all the time. Most of her magic attacks are easy as hell to avoid, and the rapier attacks are as well if you aren't too good at parrying. When she reaches 50% HP, she'll teleport and this time spawn 4 clones of herself that have access to the same attacks that she does, but deal less damage and die in one hit. This phase can be chaos if you leave the other sages alive for any amount of time, so quickly dispersing of them is definitely a good strategy here. As I said, they all die in one hit and don't even have a health bar, so if you've got a fast weapon that you can use to get rid of them very easily. Alternatively, you can go balls to the wall and DPS the main sage by looking for its purple spells and try to kill it before it or any of the sages can do anything. And this is viable if it's in a good spot and you have the DPS to do it. Altogether, the battle with the sage is weird. It's a test of damage, and whether or not you get lucky with the Soul Mass teleports is up to RNG. I dislike this fight, but knowing this trick, it makes it much more bearable. Say hello to Yhorm the Giant, a gimmick boss that could have been so much more than what FromSoft made him. I understand where they were going with this fight. It's a nice throwback to the Storm King from Demon's Souls, where you had to use the Storm Ruler to defeat a giant foe. But why did they have to do it to a boss that was arguably the most anticipated from watching the opening cutscene? Fighting Yhorm without the Storm Ruler is absolutely possible, but if you're on anything more than you gain +2, he just has so much health, it's normally not fun at all. It's an exhilarating fight when you battle him toe to toe, not particularly difficult due to the slowness and how telegraphed his attacks are, but his sheer amount of health just makes it unfun, making Storm Ruler the only option unless you want the fight to last 2 hours. Even with the Storm Ruler though, I can't deny how cool this fight is. You're striking down a giant warrior using the power of the storm, and it feels badass, especially when he bursts into flames for phase 2. Accompanied by some of the best music in the game, you have to find windows to charge up the sword amongst his brutal swings and deceivingly quick punches and stunning AoEs he can unleash. I don't know what more I can say about Yhorm. He's a lackluster fight if you use the Storm Ruler, but I cannot deny how badass the fight feels even if you use it. That certainly gives him some redeeming factor, but I love fighting him toe to toe even more. I just never have the patience to fight him for 2 hours. This is one of the best examples of a boss whose difficulty doesn't scale very well in repeat playthroughs. It's kind of a meme now on my Twitch, over at twitch.tv/mynameiscosmic, that you should definitely check out. By the way, I stream a lot of Souls and Sekiro, but this boss is the one that actually made me uninstall the game on my first playthrough because I found them so difficult. Nowadays, they're not much more than a speed bump in my repeat playthroughs. I'm not saying this to brag either. I find it strange that the difficulty of this boss does not scale very much at all. Their moveset gets very easy to understand after a while, and it's pretty obvious when their combo ends and you can punish them. Once their HP reaches a certain point, or as a timer is reached, other Abyss Watchers will revive and help the others in the fight. This turns the fight into a gank, so the best strategy is to just run away until the Abyss Watchers with red eyes gets revived. Red has a chance to help you or the other Abyss Watchers in the fight, so if he's on your side, you can duel it out with another Watcher while he deals with the other. Even while Red is alive, you have to be wary of what the other Watchers are doing. They have a few charge attacks that can close the distance on you, and taking on one of these attacks from your behind is certainly not something you want. Phase 1 is a balancing act. If Red is attacking you, you have to try and bait one of the other Watchers into hitting him, so his aggro transfers over to them, and while the others are dueling, you have a big opportunity to whittle down the other's health bar. When the main Watcher is killed, the blood of the wolf is manifested into one Watcher, who revives and battles the unkindled as a true Lord of Cinder. This phase vastly increases the Watcher's moveset, increases the range of his attacks, and adding fire damage on top of it. He has access to spinning combos that have deceiving reach and always end in the same flip attack that can be backstabbed fairly easily for big damage. The stabs he does have crazy reach, and the potential to stun into their next attack and come at you really quickly is really high. The fight is not a gank anymore, but it doesn't need to be. This Watcher can attack so quickly, deals so much damage, and has such a varied moveset, it will absolutely be the first wall players reach in their first playthrough of Dark Souls 3. I can't deny the fantastic lore surrounding these warriors and the beautiful, melancholic soundtrack, and despite their difficulty flaws, it absolutely does not make it a bad fight. In fact, one of the best in the entire game.
You ignorant slaves. Finally taken notice, have you?
This boss was really difficult to place, and as I'm writing this script, I don't really know what to talk about. I feel with Oceiros is either gonna fuck your ass raw or take AI from Demon's Souls and just let you attack him freely with no retaliation, and this applies with both phases. The first of which starts off with him utilizing his staff as well as an ice breath intermittently. Neither of them have any particularly threatening or special moves. As you whittle down his very large health bar, all this boss really expects from you is to dodge some fairly simple and basic slams and swings, making distance occasionally when he spews ice everywhere. The hardest part about this phase is how big his health bar is. Depending on when you come here and what your damage is like at this point in the game, his health can take a long time to get through and might sap you with a few Estus alone. His head takes the most damage and isn't the most difficult thing to access, but the safest way to approach the fight is the classic I'm versus a big creature in Dark Souls formula. Attach yourself to the crotchal area of the boss and stay there as much as possible to get damage done. Once you initiate phase 2, this becomes much more difficult and the fight can become chaotic. He screams the name of his baby Ocelot, gets rid of his staff, and uses his entire body to send sporadic flurries of bites, scratches, spins, tail swipes, and even more ice breath your way. He has charging attacks that make his entire body a hitbox that deals a ton of damage and can feel pretty cheap if you get hit by it and are very poorly coordinated, but he needs a lot of time to recover after using it, and this can be a very good window to get a bunch of damage done to him. I mentioned at the start of the fight, it can feel pretty unpredictable, and this is where it comes into play. It all depends on what attacks you get. Attacks that make the entire boss's body a hitbox can feel really cheap, and Oceiros has a couple of them. If he spams them, it feels pretty unfair. It can definitely make the fight a lot more difficult than if he just used his other attack. There's a lot about this fight that I like, but it definitely has its flaws, but altogether the fight with Oceiros is a fair challenge that will require you to change up strategies upon the transition of phases. The difficulty of this fight depends almost entirely on when you fight him. This boss is found in the Smoldering Lake and can be fought even before Wolnir is killed. You can actually fight him with literally 3 bosses dead, Iudex, Vordt, and the Abyss Watchers, and this can make the fight almost unrealistically difficult. In the same vein, you can come back to the Demon King and fight him all the way after completing both of the DLCs and killing the final boss of the game. Because of this, I put him just under halfway on the list. Being the final alive witness of the Chaos of Izalith, the old Demon King attacks with his great hammer and has a wide range of AoE fire attacks that can cause you a lot of problems. The standard swings from the hammer aren't much of a problem, but the fire will mean you have to make distance on him a lot, and this can mean you're at the mercy of the deceptive range of his swings. Similarly to Manus, the king has different attacks that require you to do different things based on when he swings his hammer. If he slams it on the ground multiple times, it means you've got to prepare to roll through a burning ring of fire that will surround him. If he swings it in the air, it means you have to get away from him and dodge asteroids that will home in on you for a while. And that's pretty much the entire fight. There is one attack where he kisses at you and blows a giant flamethrower at you, which is annoying because even if you dodge it at the right time, you more often than not get stuck on his arms, which gets you hit anyway, and you can even get stuck in his mace, which means you can't attack or move, and the only way out is to die or get lucky with his attack. It's definitely the glitchiest boss of the game and the one that I skip the most because it's not that fun, and either seems unrealistically difficult if you fight him early or is absurdly easy if you fight him later on. His placement at number 15 on the list is thanks only to his crazy damage and resistances, along with the fact that he does have glitches that can completely ruin the fight regardless of how rare they are. Originally, this fight was going to be the Deacons of the Deep, and Aldrich was supposed to emerge from a coffin near where he spawns now when phase 1 of the Deacons was killed. Now it's replaced by a full fight with the Devourer of Gods himself, donning the still alive, slowly devouring body of the Dark Sun Gwyndolin. Following this is a long, gelatinous tail made up of a conglomerate of bones, devoured flesh and limbs. This takes less damage than the Gwyndolin, but is much easier to hit amongst his deceptively long-range spins and sweeps. He also uses his Dark Moon bow in phase 1 to cover the side of his body he's currently facing in a swarm of arrows, but it's not much of a problem in phase 1 because they don't track you around. Before you have the opportunity to hit him for a significant amount of damage, he'll slam his staff into the ground and teleport as far as he can away from you. This is really useful to know as it will eliminate some sense of unpredictability from the fight and will allow you to keep as much pressure on him as possible. When he reaches 50% health, they'll come out of the ground on fire and have access to a whole new range of attacks, all of which adding fire damage to the mix. Aldrich also has the same arrow attack in this phase, except now it tracks you flawlessly, and not taking any damage to it is seemingly impossible, and using the broken pillars to run around in circles appears to be one of the best way to take minimal damage from it. Amongst this, he can cast magic that is far less lethal but can absolutely contribute to your health getting depleted. Even if you do manage to get close to him, the surrounding fire can make it awkward, especially if taking a single tick of damage stuns you and interrupts any of your attacks. The melee attacks Aldrich sends your way are some of the strangest in the game, and in my opinion, the majority of them are really difficult to read and punish. The question is really, how long can you survive versus Aldrich's arrows and magic attacks while simultaneously keeping a good distance to bait and punish his melee attacks? Aldrich is one of my personal least favorite bosses in Dark Souls 3 because of how the arrows work, but I cannot deny that I die often to just missing dodges because I find him so difficult to read. And at the end of it all, you face the culmination of all of the Lords of Cinder. The absolute final being of defense against anybody that would wish to threaten the flame, the Soul of Cinder. He wields the Filing Greatsword, which he uses to change his fighting style to resemble that of how the other Lords of Cinder fought. The first way is a standard longsword where he uses different fast slashes and lunges at close range, dealing fairly significant damage with each attack. The second is a scimitar, arguably the most difficult of them all, where he uses extremely quick slashes and weapon arts to deal damage to the player, stunning them and then making distance between them, where he will then use different pyromancies that will buff his damage and his defense. His third method is a pike, where he uses a wide range of forward lunges that have deceptive reach and deal the most damage out of all the melee phases, and these attacks track you like crazy. He has a lot of other attacks in this phase and has access to various miracles that can heal him and boost his damage. His final option is a staff, where he uses sorceries to attack the player. Keeping aggressive versus Soul of Cinder is definitely the way to go, especially during the straight sword and sorcery phases, as he staggers fairly generously, and this can open up many windows for significant damage. Once you've depleted his health bar down to where it's almost zero, Soul of Cinder will delve his sword into the ground and ember himself, abandoning his previous moveset and summoning the power of Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. He introduces this phase with a flurry of attacks that will stun lock you similarly to Manus's and finish off the combo with a very big AoE. If you've played Dark Souls, then Cinder's moveset will be very familiar to you. He can close the distance with the renowned parryable attack that Gwyn uses and swings a longsword the same as he did. And in case this wasn't enough, he will call the power of lightning towards you in several different ways depending on your distance from him. I was originally going to put this boss as the hardest because how am I supposed to kill a boss while there's tears in my eyes? I want to be very clear that I have played almost 3,200 hours of this series and I have not played more than 2 minutes of PvP. Because of this, I suck at fighting PvP like enemies, which by extension seems to make me frustrated when fighting them, and their champion's Gravetender is no exception, so please excuse me if my experience and frustration leaks into my ranking. The first phase of a fight that might have the most gorgeous arena in the game involves the champion's Gravetender, a warrior wielding the Valor Heart, a special paired set of a broadsword and a small shield, and a special weapon art which the Gravetender uses frequently. He approaches you and uses the Valor Heart to deal damage to you as well as block your attacks using weapon arts. He may be fairly easy to stun and have his poise broken for some big damage, but the speed in which he can approach you can be intimidating, and you can go in for a swing right as he uses the Valor Heart's shield art, which will give him much more poise and allow him to attack you through it. Again, this could be tied with my all but 2 minutes of PvP experience, so you'll have to let me know if I'm right or wrong about that. When you get the Gravetender's health down to about half, he will whistle and the Gravetender's Greatwood will enter the fray. This is where the fight can become very chaotic. If the champion's Gravetender is still alive with the wolf, he can keep his distance from you and substitute his Valor Heart for a staff, and will cast multiple homing arrows or stab freeze spells your way. It can sometimes be overwhelming handling the melee moveset of both bosses at the same time, so you have to focus the Gravetender and kill him before it's too late. If you do manage to kill him though, the fight with the Great Wolf isn't the hardest thing in the world by any means. At first, his crazy rushing attacks are scary, but the visual cue of the swirling wind around his head can definitely assist in dodges. At the end of some of its charges, it will pause to breathe frost breath at the player that will cause major frostbite very quickly. And just as you think the fight is over, the Great Wolf buffs himself when it reaches lower health, Blood and Zorlan style, and this buff boosts his damage and defense. I enjoy the fight with the Great Wolf, but the introduction of this weird gladiator PvP enemy as one of the health bars ruins it for me. The renowned Dragonslayer Ornstein skin boss of Dark Souls 3 appears as an autonomous set of Dragonslayer Armour. Wielding the Dragonslayer Great Axe and Great Shield, this old warrior rests waiting for you underneath one of his pilgrim butterflies. Upon entering the Fog Gate, he very quickly teaches you that despite his seemingly bulky and heavy appearance, he can close the distance in on you very quickly by launching himself at you shield first. I can safely say that this Great Shield is far scarier than his Great Axe for the sheer reason that despite its appearance, the attacks from that thing are quick. They all stun you, where Armor will then subsequently maul you with his Great Axe, which, much like its appearance, hits like a bus. One problem you can face though is that he can break the railings around the arena, and getting caught up in one of his combos can mean you go flying straight off the edge. When phase 2 begins, those pilgrim butterflies have their AI turned on and Armor goes crazy. His attacks are much faster than before and deal even more damage, is capable of shooting a projectile to the other side of the arena that ignores walls, close the distance pounce on you just as quickly as before and backhand you with his shield all the same. The Pilgrim Butterflies will let out an unnerving scream before firing a volley of asteroids all Demon King style that makes the fight much harder. The combination of sheer damage and the fact that it's essentially a gank with some living failures added on the side when phase 2 begins definitely makes the Dragonslayer Armour a very formidable opponent and puts him just outside the top 10 hardest bosses in Dark Souls 3. One of my personal favorite bosses in the game, the Demon in Pain and Demon from Below, is a gank fight involving two inflamed demons. They both share a very similar moveset. If they're very far away from you, they'll spew poison at you or close the distance very quickly with some dangerous leaps. If they're close to you, they'll unleash many different attacks depending on what mode they're in. At any point in time, either of the demons can release a slam down attack that will turn them from inflamed mode to a burned out mode. If one of them is in burned out mode, it will be less aggressive, especially if it's at a distance, and instead of charging at you aggressively with a frenzy of claw slashes, it will opt for a more passive approach of spewing a miasma of poison at you either from afar or even up close. This prevents the player from instinctively tunnel visioning one of the demons, while the other is playing it a bit more passively at the other end of the arena. Because of this, it's one of the very few gank bosses throughout Soulsborne that does not feel unfair. But naturally, having a boss number go from 1 to 2 makes the fight much more difficult. You not only have to keep an eye on the demon you're currently attacking, but also make sure that the other isn't about to spew poison at you, as this could lead to you getting staggered, leaving you no choice but to potentially tank some very hard-hitting slashes from the other. These demons also try to roll catch, so good luck trying to spam roll for any extended amount of time without being caught on recovery. Once you finally whittle down both of their health bars, the Demon Prince will spawn. What's awesome is that the Demon Prince can have two different movesets depending on which of the demons in phase 1 you killed first. If you kill the Demon in Pain first, you'll get the easier variant of the Demon Prince, one that prefers to unleash a laser beam attack that will leave it open for a while for potential huge damage. If you kill the Demon from Below last, you'll get a more difficult variant, one which prefers to stay away from you and rain chaos with showers of fireballs. Whichever one you choose to kill, the Demon in Pain, Demon from Below, and the final Demon Prince will absolutely test your skills at the beginning of this fantastic DLC, and is in my opinion one of the best designed gank fights in the Dark Souls series. You know, this is the first time in any of the boss ranking videos I've made so far where I can confidently shit on a boss without the risk of people scolding me for it. Since this is a difficulty ranking, I'm gonna try my best to stay clear of talking about why this fight is so bad, but no doubt that will leak in. This is one of the two bosses in the franchise, unless you count the Looking Glass Knight in DS2, where a player can be the boss. And even then, you can't be the old monk anymore because of the Demon Souls servers being shut down. The fight starts off with an unskippable lecture from Judicator Argo, and then he summons a Painting Guardian. Cool, it's a Painting Guardian, nothing too bad here. Once this is killed, the player or NPC will be summoned and the boss health bar appears. As someone that is complete dogshit at PvP, I always just accept defeat when this happens. Sure, the invader cannot heal, but this still doesn't really matter if you're bad at PvP like I am. Not to mention another Painting Guardian gets summoned, making the battle a gank, and if you don't kill it in time, it can heal the invader. A player normally has the intelligence to punish you for trying to battle the Painting Guardian, unlike the NPC, which makes this fight even more difficult. If a player doesn't get summoned, an NPC called Halflight, Spear of the Church, will spawn in their place. PvE Halflight has 3 different mixes. He has a sword called the Flayed Blade, and either one or two-hands it. If he's one-handing it, he becomes a parry god, so it's best to either wait for him to go two-handed or ideally whip out the bow. Even then though, amongst his respawning soul mass and spear lightning attacks walling you off, finding windows to attack him is still pretty difficult. Getting close to him while he's two-handed is also extremely risky, as he spams weapon arts with infinite stamina and mana that are some of the fastest and harding hitting attacks in the entire game. A second Painting Guardian is also summoned during the PvE Halflight, and once again this turns the fight into a gank, and that's just not fun. All of this combined with the fact that he's a little too attached to his sword makes it one of the worst bosses in the entire franchise and is extremely annoying to fight every time. Halflight is just before Slave Knight Gael, the unanimous best boss in the game, and in the words of the Democracy, I don't want dogshit presented as an appetizer before decadence. The The Dancer of the Boreal Valley has the best animations and the best features of a boss in the franchise, in my opinion. The melancholic and calming music in the background of a fight that truly feels like you're fighting a dancer with swords is very atmospheric. Pontiff gifted the dancer 2 swords, 1 fire and 1 poison, that she uses to attack the player using various spins and uppercuts. What makes the dancer one of the harder bosses in Dark Souls 3 is the fact that her lanky posture means that her combos can be extremely sporadic and very difficult to read, and combining this with some extremely fast recovery times, the dancer becomes a very difficult feat. Her most powerful attack is one in which her thick ass blinds you temporarily, meaning you can't move or do anything for a few seconds. She severely punishes greed, as many of the harder bosses do, and can roll catch you if you aren't careful. Not to mention that many of her attacks leave residual fire that can stun you and lead into yet another hit. One attack means she tries to grab you with her right hand, which always catches me and a lot of other people out, as it's deceiving in its hitbox and which direction you should dodge. This grab attack, especially on New Game Plus cycles, probably means your death. She has a lot of health considering, and when she reaches phase 2, she adds a plethora of new attacks to her arsenal, arguably the most recognizable and feared being the 8 dreaded spins. Dancer will go absolutely crazy and start spinning around multiple times, all of which have massive range. You can stick yourself to her ass and survive all of the spins, only needing to roll on the penultimate one, but this is extremely difficult and not to mention very risky. This phase is similar to the first, except she is much more aggressive, unleashing combos that feel like they never end, while simultaneously dealing insane damage with each swing. She can turn around, slamming a sword on the ground, then almost instantly follow up with a number of swings or ash cloud attacks, finishing each combo off with potential AoE blasts, and all of this combined with insane damage in bulk makes the Dancer of the Boreal Valley one of the hardest bosses in Dark Souls 3. This boss is the one that killed me the most on my first playthrough of Dark Souls 3. This fight starts off with Lorian, the Elder Prince, and on paper is a fairly standard, straightforward fight. Lorian swings at you with his sword in surprisingly telegraphed ways, so much so you could even say his attacks are very easy to dodge. But he does have many other things he can do that makes this duel really tough. There's a sense of RNG involved in this fight, since Lorian can teleport around the arena, be it far away from you, just behind you, or on top of you. If you're locked onto him, it gives you a very good idea of where he teleports to, but his very hard-hitting swings can be tough to predict if he's teleporting around constantly. Lorian can teleport far away from you as well to prepare a holy ray attack that is deceiving in its dodge timing if you can't get closer to him, and is very likely to one-shot players regardless of their health. Staying right up against Lorian is the best strategy, but leaves you open to relentless attacks that only give you a 1 or 2 hit window before he unleashes them again. Having him teleport away from you without doing a holy ray isn't too threatening here, but means you'll have to be prepared to either dodge an attack after another teleport or a fire wave, which can be tough to dodge depending on your distance from him. When you've killed Lorian and you think the fight is over, Lothric teleports down to resurrect his crippled brother, because that is their curse. Phase 2 doesn't change the fight an incredible amount, but it means you now have to kill Lorian again, and by extension Lothric, who is now on his back. Lothric will be firing magic in your direction, while Lorian keeps his older moveset with a couple of very minor changes. For example, the big ray attack, which you probably made the habit of getting behind him and punishing, now has a very fast follow-up swing that prevents you from doing this. The magic that Lothric creates and throws your direction isn't too dangerous. None of it does any substantial amount of damage individually, and his bigger beams are very coordinated. But the fight doesn't end until you've killed Lothric, who provides more than ample time to punish him if you kill Lorian again. Combining the fact that Lorian deals immense damage, Lothric adds magic to the mix in the second phase, and the fact they both have quite a girthy health bar, Lorian Elder Prince and Lothric Younger Prince makes for one of the most formidable bosses you will face in Dark Souls 3. This boss might be in the number 6 spot, but I bet that still surprises a lot of you. I think the difficulty of this boss is severely overhyped and overestimated. Sure, he's very, very difficult, but I don't think he's the uncontested hardest that a lot of people seem to think he is. The first phase of the Nameless King involves the king riding his chicken. Almost everybody I've spoken to hates this phase because the biggest enemy in this fight is the camera. His chicken is huge, and the king, who's riding on the back of its neck, can release many different attacks with his spear that can be really difficult to see. since you have to get close to him to deal any damage to the chicken's head. When he leans backwards so the king can attack, he's off screen, so you have to either guess when the attack lands, painstakingly memorize the timings, or get extremely good at managing the camera. Not to mention that you have to repeat this phase every time you die to the Nameless King, which makes it annoying and exhausting. The chicken doesn't have too much health though, has a few attacks that can be punished easily, and a huge arena to compensate for its size, and depending on your DPS will let you stun and riposte it for massive damage. Once the chicken is killed, the dragon-slaying god of war will dismount and absorb the power of his mount to initiate the second phase, which is a fairly standard ordeal on paper. I still have the awful habit of dodging when an attack starts rather than when it lands with some bosses, and this makes the Nameless King really hard for me. Many of his attacks are just standard swings, but because he has access to a crazy amount of combos and a massive range of attacks that all have various timings, he can interrupt and completely change them mid-fight. As I said, I think what makes this fight so difficult for me is that he's one of the most difficult to adapt to. Some of his charges are delayed, some are instant, his more close-up and personal combos are generally faster but also spice it up with some varied stab timings, and on top of all of that, he deals incredible damage with his spear. Because of how varied his attack timings are, you can die in 2 seconds by missing dodges and misinterpreting his combos. The Nameless King is one of the most difficult bosses in this series, has an irritating and exhausting first phase, excellent music, awesome lore, and one that everybody remembers as being one of the most satisfying bosses to kill in Dark Souls 3. Speaking of fantastic bosses, we have Slave Knight Gael landing himself at the number 5 spot. Gael is my favorite boss, and he offers one of the best balances of challenge and fairness the entire series has to offer, packaged into a boss that I simply do not have enough superlatives to appropriately praise. Gael attacks the player on all fours in his first phase, his super lanky posture complementing his fast and frequent swings, a lot of which having him jump into the air to slam or stab afterwards. His attacks aren't by any means particularly difficult to dodge in the first phase, but his enormous health bar means you have to take advantage of any window of punishment you can find. Gael provides these, but also provides many different combos that require you to manage stamina carefully. Some combos end with him jumping back and leaping at you sword first, which if you can accommodate for, will give you a very good window to punish or heal if you need to. In the same vein, he also has guaranteed staggers, which gives you even more windows. Phase 1 isn't particularly difficult, in fact it's fairly standard. Some basic swings and combos that are fairly telegraphed and a couple of different finishing moves for each, like the forward stab I mentioned earlier or a brutal slam down onto the ground, both of which allowing for a fair amount of hits. After a while though, Gael will find the power of the blood of the dark soul and the battle changes immensely for an incredible second phase. He now stands on his own 2 feet and his sword isn't the only thing you have to worry about getting hit by. Gael now adds multiple new weapons to his arsenal like a crossbow and some magic boomerangs. He still uses his sword the vast majority of the time, but almost all of his sword attacks have his cape follow up behind him which can hit and even stun you, even if you dodge his sword, encouraging you to delay your rolls and pay very close attention to which way you're rolling. Gael also has a subliminal phase 3 where he occasionally explodes into red skulls which will fly around in his general direction before landing on the ground and later summoning lightning wherever they landed. This is really useful to know as Gael will be jumping and leaping around the air rapidly in the player's direction in the meantime. With this you have to carefully manage your movement and stamina to make sure you dodge Gael's swings, which can be in combos of 3 or 4 attacks, and also not just dodge straight into where the lightning is going to strike. This boss can be very chaotic in his second and third phases and is absolutely the perfect balance of difficulty and fairness. Gael is my personal favorite boss in this series and offers a significant amount of challenge and will definitely cause players a lot of issues on their first playthroughs of this game. Yet another one of my favorite bosses in this series, Pontiff Sulyvahn, was the boss that truly and absolutely taught me to get good. A lot of you probably confused as to why Pontiff is so far down on the list, as most other ranking videos out there put him much higher due to the fact that you can just parry and riposte him to death. However, there is much more to this boss's design than simply just counter-attacking and killing him, and it's the design of this boss as a whole that I'm looking at and why he's so low on the list. I heard rumors from my friends that played this game before that Pontiff was one of the hardest bosses in the game, if not the hardest, and I totally agree. First of all, he's one of the few bosses in Dark Souls 3 that actually punishes you for spam rolling. His combos are quite sporadic, and he swings his swords in ways that means you absolutely have to watch his arms to make sure you won't get roll caught on recovery. I think that for this reason alone, Pontiff deserves a spot on this list. Absolutely every boss in the game you possibly could have killed at this point pretty much allow you to spam roll and get away unscathed, save maybe the Abyss Watchers on extremely rare occasions. Pontiff doesn't let you do this, making him one of the few bosses in the game that genuinely requires constant attention if you're attempting to dodge him. His combos can feel endless. Sometimes he'll attack you once or twice and call it quits, or attack you 12 times, leaving you no stamina to punish him afterwards, and knowing where your attack windows are in this fight is extremely important as, unless you're parrying him, they are very few and far between. Once phase 2 begins, the fight gets even more chaotic. Pontiff will summon a clone of himself, a purple phantom version that will telegraph what the actual Pontiff is going to do next. Design-wise, I think this is brilliant, as the phantom doesn't deal quite as much damage as Pontiff, yet still deals enough damage to scare you to make sure you dodge the both of them, with the actual Pontiff mirroring the phantom's every move. Your choice here is to either focus Pontiff while his phantom is still alive, or kill the phantom and reduce the fight to a 1 versus 1 again. With very few punishment windows and relentless combos that require intense concentration in order to escape, Pontiff Sulyvahn lands himself at the 4th hardest boss in Dark Souls 3. So here's another boss that I feel like most people are gonna disagree with. Champion Gundyr is another one of those bosses that you can just parry and riposte to death without all too much hassle, really. Him and Iudex are arguably the easiest parries in the game, and phase 2 doesn't even change it all that much, but just as I did with Pontiff, I'm looking at this boss as a whole in terms of design. Although he's basically just Iudex on Adderall, this is all it takes to mean that the removal of that parry shield from your kit makes him an extremely challenging fight. Gundyr bends and twists his body in all sorts of ways that don't look possible while wearing all that armor to reach you with his halberd that has extremely deceptive reach. Because of this, Gundyr has many different attacks and a wide range of branching combos that can be interrupted with anything ranging from another standard swing, a shoulder barge, a kick, a quick slap with his handle, and even more. Phase 2 makes this even more frequent, with Gundyr utilizing absolutely everything he possibly can to deal damage to the player. And that to me is what makes this fight so amazing and so difficult. He's programmed to punish healing, so just as you think you're safe to take a sip of that Estus, he's closing the distance on you shockingly quickly and slamming your sorry face into the ground for even thinking about healing. I hate not having much more to talk about for our 3rd hardest boss, but I seriously think I've covered everything that makes this fight hard. Gundyr uses everything he possibly can to attack you: his blade, his handle, his hands, his butthole, his shoulders, his legs and feet, his speed, the environment, with him being able to interrupt the vast majority of his combos with anything I listed, all in such quick succession. You have to keep in mind everything that he can possibly follow up with and make last-second decisions based on what you think is best, especially when his punishment windows are so few and far between. The most thrilling and best dragon boss fight in Soulsborne, Darkeater Midir, is renowned by almost every player for being one of the most difficult and brutal boss fights in the game and even in this series. The fight always starts off with one of Midir's standard charges. He breathes fire in front of him and mindlessly swings his claws around, inflicting terrifying damage if anything hits you. Thankfully, his entire body isn't a hitbox in this attack, so if you do manage to get underneath him, you can just run along with him. This is basically what the majority of Midir's attacks involve: very large areas are covered by his claw swings, distances are closed disconcertingly quickly by his many different biting attacks, and he can hit you from a range if he decides to breathe fire at you. One such attack starts with him breathing fire on the ground and then unleashing a calamitous laser beam afterwards that is probably gonna one-shot you. Due to the size of Midir, it may seem easy to deal damage to him, especially since his feet can be quite easy to access, but good luck dealing any significant amount of damage to him by attacking those feet of his. You want to be attacking his head for any substantial amount of damage, and even then, his absolutely gargantuan health bar makes it look like you're just coughing on him. Mid is surprisingly fast at moving around the arena if he so chooses, having access to multiple charge attacks and the utilization of those beautiful wings to fly across to the other side. And just as you thought this dragon couldn't get any angry, he'll explode into dark energy and initiate a second phase. Now with attacks even more relentless relentless than before, Midir furiously assails towards the Unkindled with seemingly endless combos of swipes, bites, and flamethrowers that all require extremely precise dodge timings and must be done so in the correct direction. Getting hit by even one of these attacks is probably the death of you, as they have such timings that it means you'll more than likely get roll caught for trying to recover afterwards. The saving grace about this fight is that Midir requires a short amount of time to recover himself after many of these combos, especially his laser beam attack in phase 2, and these offer windows for punishment or healing. Getting overzealous while he's recovering can also be the death of you, as he doesn't offer an incredible amount of time to get hits on him, so don't get carried away. The fight ends with a riposte that will chunk his health bar, and you'll just need to hit him a few more times to end the fight. Altogether, Darkeater Midir is a very challenging boss fight that is certain to kill many a player. His ginormous health bar combined with his size and attack ranges, as well as his terrifying damage, makes him a force to be reckoned with, and in my opinion, the second hardest boss in Dark Souls 3. Before we get to the hardest boss though, I just want to shout out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/mynameiscosmic, where I play way too much Soulsborne, and I would love to see you there. Oh man, where do I even begin with this boss? Her first phase is actually fairly straightforward on paper. She spins and swings her scythe around her quickly to deal damage to the player. She feels similar to Pontiff in the way she attacks. Sometimes her combos will only be 1 or 2 slashes, other times they feel like they never end. When she's not attacking you, she can dash around the arena, even make herself invisible. If you know what to do and listen to what she does, you can locate her again before she does anything too dangerous, but learning this and getting used to it can take a very long time. Once you've slain her first phase, Daddy wakes up not too happy that her daughter was killed, believe it or not, revives her, and joins the fray. With a completely fresh health bar, you now have to skirmish the both of them. Father Ariandel unleashing brutal slams with his pot that can be fairly simple to dodge if you watch him enough, with some gargantuan AoEs and CC added on for good measure. Friede is in the back in a more passive state than she was in phase 1, but will not hesitate to hit you with those same combos if you get too close to her for too long. You can choose whether to battle Friede or Ariandel in this phase, but whatever you do, you have to make sure you're constantly mindful of what the other one is doing. Friede can actually heal the both of them if she's left alone for too long, which takes a while and is easily punished, but will still happen if you aren't paying close attention. Once you've killed this health bar, Friede arises once again for a third phase of the boss fight under the name of the Black Flame, which is yet another full and just as girthy health bar. This is phase 1 turned up 100 notches. Friede is now frightfully fast, and her perilous long combos deals crazy amount of damage, can throw different dark orbs at you, as well as add a few more attacks to her arsenal, like Lady Maria's leap into the air to crash down, which she always starts off the phase with. Black Flame Friede almost feels too fast for Dark Souls 3. She takes absolutely no time to recover, so even if you have stamina remaining at the end of her flurries, the window of opportunity you have to get even a single hit on her is exceedingly thin. Frostbite, apparently endless flurries of swings, calamitous damage, and 3 girthy health bars make Sister Black Flame Friede and Father Ariandel the most difficult and exhausting boss fight in Dark Souls 3 in my opinion. And that concludes the ranking. I hope you all enjoyed. Before you click off the video, if you want to watch more of my boss ranking videos, be sure to subscribe and watch the playlist. Check out my Twitch for some more Soulsborne content and variety, and tell me what you thought of the video in the comments below. As always, please, before commenting, remember this video is entirely my opinion, so please be respectful before being a meanie. Thanks for watching, everyone. I will see you next time.